Right, joining me now, our panel, Sky News host James Morrow and the host of the wonderful Power Hour, Gab Power. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the fiscal end of things today. Government spending has hit a record high, with federal, state and local government spending reaching 28% of GDP. That's Banana Republic sort of territory. It comes as the federal government debt's only months away from crossing into the $1 trillion mark. I tell you what, Gab, when I was a kid, $1 million was a lot of money, then $1 billion, and now we've got kids in this country that are going to grow up with the trillion in their lexicon. This is not sustainable.
Not at all, and it is so depressing. It is so depressing that we have a government that cannot control its spending. And you look at the figures, the government spending is higher now than it was at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was a time, of course, we were told that this is the biggest crisis that we've faced since World War II, unprecedented times, and businesses were closed and people were losing their jobs, so you could possibly justify the levels of spending that we saw there. But it's interesting, this research by Australian Industry Group shows that when the pandemic hit, that's when government spending reached just under 27% of GDP. It then dropped back, but then since then, it's been rising and rising and now at 28%. And business leaders are calling this out for what it is, not sustainable, it's not responsible. And as you say, this comes at a time that debt is going to hit $1 trillion in just a couple of months. And you look at the amount of interest that we're paying, just at the moment, the government is currently paying $2 billion a month in interest costs. That's going to rise to $3 billion. So there are plenty of concerns about where this is heading, and plenty of Australians would like to see a balanced budget.
Yeah, and I'll remind people at home, I mean, government interest on debt is just like your interest on the mortgage. It's dead money. You know, it's money that you could be spending on other things, and $2 billion is an absolutely cracking teaching hospital, a big metropolitan hospital, every single month that we're wasting, paying back debt predominantly to overseas lenders. Let's go to the issues raised by the building industry. For all the talk about housing, we just don't have enough people, James, to build the homes. The building sector, they want to shake up of the migration program. They say we need to bring more tradespeople into the country. Now, Adam Crichton dropped a number last night that shocked me. Have a listen.
They just don't have the workforce to build these homes. I mean, just remember that stat from a few weeks ago I said on this show that only 3% of the migrants on temporary visas are tradesmen.
Yeah, as I said, I was shocked. 3% only of tradies are coming into the country.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't surprise me at all, though, when you look, Peter, at the overall migrant makeup. You know, huge numbers of people coming in as students, but on all sorts of different kind of degrees. And a lot of those aren't actually at, you know, things you would think of as sort of big universities where they're studying high-level skills, but rather things that are these trade colleges that are essentially nothing more than visa mills. And at the same time, you've got a skills list, which is far too huge and far too broad and not focused enough. So not only do we have the problem of bringing in this very large cohort of migrants, they're not the migrants we need to be doing what we need to do. And it's very cynical because all it does is, you know, economists talk about this thing called capital shallowing. So you're spreading out the GDP over more people, even though you're making it look like it's bigger. That's why, you know, the GDP figures say we're not in a recession, though we are, really, technically. Personally, if we had the right people coming in to do the right things we need to do this next wave of building that we need as a country, you'd unleash so much wealth. But as you just said in the last topic, so much of this wealth is getting eaten up and tied up by government activity, whether it's the bureaucracy or the NDIS.
Let's go to the plans that were scuppered today. The government was going to send 5 backbench MPs on an NDIS study tour to Europe. Big backlash to this one. Here's the minister's back down.
As I understand it, as NDIS committee members have reflected on the scale of the task that we have as a government and a parliament to secure the long-term future of the NDS here in Australia, their time is best spent working on that domestically.
Well, I don't know what they would have been looking at, Gab. No one's got an NDIS that's as out of control or anything like it in Europe. I mean, this was absolutely a junket.
Absolutely, and certainly was not going to be a good look. I will say not as bad as the images we saw coming out of China today with Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews alongside Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. I'm looking forward to your take on that later, Peter. But this junket is just, it's absolutely ridiculous when you look at all the problems the NDIS has and the costs. I mean, the costs are out of control. It's currently costing around $50 billion this financial year. It's going to grow to about $100 billion within a decade without reform. And this junket to send 5 MPs for 10 days during December to go to the UK, to go to Sweden. The flights alone, the business class flights, were going to cost around $70,000. So finally, after this backlash, it turns out that actually the work can be done right here in Australia.
And they're not even front benchers. They're not even running the portfolio. They're not working on the policy in the department. They are literally backbenchers on a committee. The report gets filed in the bin basically every single time. I just think this is crackers. And to be fair to Daniel Andrews, and I'm, not often sticking up for him, he is a former premier in China, but the current premier, the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen, well, she wants to go there too. She's about to head off to China on the 14th of September for a 5-day mission, but she's not alone. The Lord Mayor of Melbourne, Nick Rees, he's also overseas to China, but also Japan and Hong Kong, Brazil and India. I mean, the Victorian government's basically belly up bankrupt. The state's belly up bankrupt. And Nick Rees has got his local council in Victoria. The mayoralty is in the red. I mean, this is outrageous, James.
Well, look, it's also outrageous. We have all of these here in New South Wales. We have the same thing, too. We have these mayoral sister city relationships, they're called, where, mayors and councillors go off and they spend all of this money to look at how they do things in, Okinawa or Rio de Janeiro or all sorts of things. And gosh, it sounds like an awful lot of fun. I've never seen any of the sort of reforms that you might learn from any of these places put onto the ground here in Sydney. I suspect it's going to be the same in Melbourne. But the Jacinta Allen trip, I actually find a lot more troubling, Peter, because she is bringing a whole swathe of MPs with her from seats in Victoria that have heavily Chinese Australian populations, and including a place like Box Hill, Chadstone. And they're trying to be quite explicit about this cementing the relationship between Labor, Chinese ethnic communities in Victoria, and the Chinese government in Beijing. I think this feels like they're running their own foreign policy here for the purposes of ethnic vote stacking. I think it goes exactly against the entire ethos of what multiculturalism should be about in this country. It smacks of a state running its own foreign policy, which of course is a ridiculous idea, but there you are. And it's also, I think, the sort of thing that makes people very cynical and makes people, I think, more divided as a community, because they start to think, well, if you're courting votes for these reasons, what does that say?
Well, it's a shrewd point, James, because the evidence is in, of course, with the Andrews government, and she was, Jacinta Allen, his number 2. The Belt and Road deal was secret for so long. Material was not provided to the Victorian Parliament. It eventually, in part, was produced, and that led the federal government to have to outlaw the agreement. So you're right to be concerned. I'll leave it there with you both. Thank you.